number one, you don't hear too much acoustic guitar these days. When you do hear it, it can be, pedestrian strumming or, a simple Travis pick. I love John Prine's quote about Travis picking. The interviewer was impressed with it, and John Prine said, "Yeah, if you got 5 seconds, I can show you how to do it."
This is Rob Ruckus.
Hey, this is Kate Clover.
Hey guys, it's Nick Collins here from The Effect and Better Strangers.
Hi, my name is Madeline Rose.
Hey, it's Ben McKelvey.
It's Tim Howard here from Mike and the Mechanics.
Hello, I'm Amanda Lehman.
I'm Billy Harvey.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Casey Sampson from the band Twist Stop.
Hey, it's Tony from Fastball.
Hello, everybody. My name is Isaiah Mitchell.
Hey, guys, it's Matt here from the White Lakes.
You're listening to Almost Famous Magazine.
Come join us for this interview. Check it out, Almost Famous Magazine.
Welcome back to The Hang, everyone, right here on Almost Famous Magazine. Thank you to everyone who joins us for these incredible discussions and conversations as we get to know amazing artists from around the world. We appreciate your subscribing, for sharing the channel, for ringing the bell, all the things that you know to do to help us and support the channel. Today, we're hanging with entrepreneur, author, philanthropist, and musician. That's a big resume. Dan Pallotta, whose second album is forthcoming, and he's recently released a single, Working Man's Son. I'm looking forward to getting to know Dan today. So Dan, welcome to The Hang.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Looking forward to hanging with you.
Yeah, that is one hell of a resume you have. And I can't wait to kind of dive in to how you brought all of that together in your life. We tend to start, though, kind of at the genesis of your music, which is, did music find you or did you find music? What was that? What's that origin story of your creativity?
My mom was super musical. She used to march us around the kitchen table with pots and pans singing McNamara's Band. She loved country music. She loved Irish music. My dad loved Roger Whittaker. And so I didn't have an older brother or sister to introduce me to Zeppelin and everybody else. So I tended to listen to, Al Martino and then a lot of John Denver. That's what got me interested in the guitar. I mean, he was in a league with Cat Stevens and Jim Croce and Gordon Lightfoot and James Taylor and Dan Fogelberg. They had these signature guitar styles, unlike any of their peers. And I loved all of them, but in particular, I loved his the way he curated every note of his guitar playing. He was a wonderful acoustic guitar player.
Yeah. No, you have hit on a bunch of my favorites as well. I mean, we're gonna take a little turn here and come back to that origin story, but we mentioned something that really fascinates me, because that unique sound that they had.
Yeah.
Right? Is it me, or is it just harder to find that these days, given that everybody has access to everyone else's creativity on an hourly, momently basis on the internet? And it was amazing back in that day to just find someone who did something so unique, and it was more of a learning journey as opposed to just an onslaught of content.
Yeah, no, it's not just you. Number one, you don't hear too much acoustic guitar these days. When you do hear it, it can be, pedestrian strumming or, a simple Travis pick. I love John Prine's quote about Travis picking. The interviewer was impressed with it, and John Prine said, "Yeah, if you got 5 seconds, I can show you how to do it." But those guys were beyond that. And well, there are two things to talk about there. I lived in LA for 25 years. I lived in Laurel Canyon, and you think about that era in the 70s, who was living there. Jackson Browne and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Jim Morrison and Joni Mitchell. I mean, they were all living within hundreds of yards of one another and hanging out at each other's houses. They were all 23, 24 years old. They didn't have families to support. They could just be creative all day long. And that's just a whole other world than people trading samples via email to put together a record. And I think that also relates to the acoustic guitar playing. There was nothing to distract you. So I think those people just spent hours and hours and hours honing their craft on the acoustic guitar. Like the John Denver stuff, it was very, very difficult to learn what exactly is he doing here. And he had a guy that played with him in his later years called Pete Huttlinger, who died of cancer, sadly. But he took the time to put together some DVDs that showed you note for note, pick for pick, everything John Denver was doing in those songs. And it is complex, It took a long time to learn some of the songs, like Michael Martin Murphy's song "Boy from the Country" that John Denver did a beautiful version of. It took me a long time to get that down, even after watching Pete's thing. So no, it's not you. That was a different era, and I don't know if it's ever coming back. You get, all right, John Mayer. There's a great acoustic guitar player. To some extent, you hear some really great acoustic guitar on the Lumineers, but you don't hear that Cat Stevens kind of thing, that Jim Croce kind of thing. It was just a magical period that I don't know will ever return.
Well, and it speaks a lot for that because of what they did, because of they've all stood the test of time, right? And
Yes.
in my opinion, and this is just me talking, you listen to an album, and if you can put your finger on it and go, that was a year or that was a time, and you specifically know, and it didn't age well because it doesn't still sound fresh,
Right.
Things you can turn on the radio and hear an old James Taylor song, Jim Croce, any of those guys, and it sounds as good and fresh as it did then.
Absolutely.
Today.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's the mark of really kind of hitting it out of the park on sound creation, and, for lack of anything else, striking a note that resonates, through generations. Because a lot of music comes and goes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also, I was thinking, there's this kind of shredding culture now that is very different from what those people were doing, very different from what Joni Mitchell was doing. And not to say anything in the least negative about him, because he's a god, Billy Strings. But that's the bluegrass genre, and it's just different from the art of Moonshadow, or it's more commonplace. It's familiar to your ear, whereas a song like Peace Train or Moonshadow was like, everything about this guitar melody is new to me, so.
Well, and a lot of those were complexly simple songs.
Yes.
While you had to go, wait a minute, how did they do this? There was a simplicity and a fragility to them that had a less is more kind of perspective to what they did. Whereas now I think it's, how do we fill this audio space with as much information as possible so that something in there connects with a listener, because I don't want to miss out on an opportunity for an audience, as opposed to giving them an experience that is more nourishing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Like the freewheeling Bob Dylan, him and his guitar and his harmonica, and the songs have to stand on the strength of their lyrics and melody. Joni Mitchell's Blue, one of the great albums of all time. It's her piano and her voice, and that's it. It's funny, like even in my own work, I'm finishing this song right now called "The Trash Man," which is about a trash man, and it's a tender little piece about this fragile soul, who's not so sure of himself. And I did a recording on the iPhone. There's something about the compression and in the iPhone. The microphone's down here. I put it on a metal music stand blocking the microphone. And then I sing this close to it, playing my guitar down here. And wow, this is magical, man. I run it through a cheap reverb app. I've got Pro Tools and Neve preamps and everything over there, but I was like, but I can't release that. That doesn't have the fidelity you're supposed to have these days and everything, and then you look at Nebraska, right? And the low fidelity on that. Maybe I'll do. I have in my mind. I want to do an album that's entirely vocal and guitar recorded on iPhone with maybe a couple of overdubs, But yeah, you feel like I can't do that because there's, everybody's got all their shiny toys out there competing for one another.
Well, you bring up an interesting topic. We have gotten to the point with technology that we've lost, I think, more infidelity than we've gained due to technology. There are two sides of the fence. Some people, they just have a huge album collection and that's all they listen to. We have digital collections. We now don't listen front to back. We listen song to song and we shuffle. And it's interesting because I've spoken to some musicians recently who had to go back and put that lower fidelity piece into the music to give it that grit and to give it that flavor that you don't necessarily get with the clean sound that you'll have from digital audio.
Yeah, and sadly, we don't even. Yeah, we used to listen to albums. Now we don't even listen song to song. I mean, one of the things that kills me is, all right, I know I put an enormous amount of effort into this song. If I put it through my studio speakers or my headphones, it sounds gorgeous. And where are people listening to it? They're listening to 17 seconds of it on YouTube. And that just kills me, So people aren't even listening to whole songs because we're so distracted. And while music has been democratized by the internet, and that is wonderful. That is really wonderful because I wouldn't be getting a shot at anybody listening to me. I don't know if anybody sits down with a pair of headphones and listens to one of my songs on Spotify or in their car because so many people are just sampling tidbits. It's like a box of chocolates. No, that's a raspberry. I don't like that one,
Yeah, no, it's different. I mean, I think we come from a similar time in music where you had to really put yourself into a position to be desirous of the experience.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was time consuming. I mean, back then you'd put an album on and you'd sit with friends in a room and, you would talk about it. You would share the liner notes. You would experience it together. And music isn't as the same experience anymore. And I kind of miss it at certain points. But I also like the freedom of, okay, I can go out and walk and I have it to myself and I'm enjoying it while seeing the world around me. So it's been an evolution, but I think, while we always gain something with technology and advancements, we lose something as well. There's always a gain and a loss.
Yeah, think about it now. Like I go for a 3.5 mile walk every morning and typically I don't bring my headphones. I'm usually like working on lyrics, but some days I do. And just my Apple Watch and my headphones, I can say, play this Tom Waits song or whatever. And there it is. I remember before the iPhone, before the iPod, right? You wanted to go to the gym and you had a cassette tape of your 10 most inspiring songs. After 3 days, you were sick of them. And if this particular song wasn't moving you on the Stairmaster, you were out of luck because you had to fast forward the tape to get to song number 2 or 3, and good luck hitting the beginning of the song, right?
And there's nothing worse than being on the Stepmaster at the gym and the whole tape unraveling.
Oh yeah.
So let's go back to you though, because I mean we're on to some little tangent here, and I love it. But so you're marching around the kitchen with pots and pans, right? And you're making your music there. What was that turn of events that brought you to, okay, music is something I want to pursue?
It really was the John Denver stuff. I was just so drawn to that beautiful tenor voice of his, and the thumb pick and the metal finger picks on a beautiful 6-string guild or a 12-string, and so that's what I started learning the guitar, just listening to his songbooks, reading his songbooks, and got a guitar teacher, and then I started put together enough songs that I could play 4 sets at a restaurant or bar. So I started playing clubs all around New England when I was in college. And, my real passion at the time was politics. I grew up, I was born on the first day of John Kennedy's presidency. So I grew up with Camelot and the mythology and the cinematic presidency, and it was alluring, and that's what I wanted to do, and be adored and be the savior of the world, and but around the time that I was able to begin pursuing that, I was also realizing that I was gay. It was 1980. There were no out politicians. There was no discussion of gay marriage or of gay people having kids. And I ran for the school committee in my hometown at the age of 19 while I was at college, and I won. But I began to get concerned because I was, closeted like everybody else was. And it's like, well, what if somebody finds out and they start to think, I'm just on the school committee, whatever, because I'm interested in kids or something. It's like, yeah, no, I better ditch this dream. And so music was kind of my fallback, and I moved to LA to try and get a record deal and plugged away at that for a long time. When you think about it, there are similarities. I think what most what most politicians love about politics, yes, there's the power, and yes, there's the governing, and they love that power. But I think more than that, they love hearing themselves through a microphone. They love hearing themselves talk. And that's what Bruce Springsteen loves. His kids call him an attention whore, and you can see it, wherever he can sop up the attention, he will. So and politics is a vein for communicating your ideas, and music is. But at the time, I was tending to try and infuse my songs with my political beliefs, and I wasn't as good at Bob Dylan at doing that. So there wasn't a lot of melody that you couldn't sing along, and I auditioned for Clive Davis, and I went to the Beverly Hills Hotel with this friend of mine who knew him, and I played him a song I wrote called American Pictures, and I must have been 27 or 6 or so, and he said, I'll never forget, he said, "This is exceptional writing. I'm going to take the rest of the tape. I'm going to Palm Springs. I'll call you when I get back." And I thought my life had changed. And he called me back, and he said, "There's just not a single I can break you with. You're in the era of Don McLean, and music has moved on from that, and we became friends, and we're friends to this day, good friends. And he called me up one day after a couple of years of playing him demos and stuff, and he said, "Look, you're very talented. You're smart. You went to a good college. You got a great future ahead of you. It's not going to be in music." And I hung up on him, and I didn't speak to him for 6 months. And then we patched that up 6 months later. But that was kind of and that's when I went on to do these things in philanthropy that I ended up doing for so many years,
I got to ask you, because you had a rare opportunity there. How did it come about that you got to perform like that for Clive Davis, to get the feedback, and B, build a relationship? Because that is not something that happens to many people. How did that happen?
No, it isn't. I had and still do. I have a friend. I have a friend named Steve Warren, who I knew in Boston, who'd gone to Harvard Law School while I was an undergrad at Harvard, and we were friends. And I was moving to Los Angeles, and he knew some people in LA because he was headed there to be an entertainment attorney. So he introduced me to a friend of his named Jeff Guthrie. Jeff was close with Clive. Jeff had come to see me play at a couple of clubs and said, "I should introduce you to Clive." And that's how that happened. And, I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was a construction worker. My mom was a full-time mom. And, I had never stayed in anything better than a Holiday Inn. 5, 6 of us in a room that was supposed to only fit 4. I was the oldest, so they used to say, "Danny, duck down. If the manager's coming by, duck down. We're only supposed to have 5 in this room." So when I got to this bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and there were drapes and couches and fireplaces and a kitchen and grand piano and Clive Davis, I was like, whoa. That was heady for a young kid. I had another heady experience when I was in college. John Denver served on Jimmy Carter's commission, World Hunger Commission, and I chaired the Harvard Hunger Action Committee. And out of the blue one day, I'm this huge John Denver fan. This is like woo-woo stuff. I kid you not. I wrote a letter, typed a letter on Harvard Hunger Action Committee stationery, seeing if John Denver would come to Harvard to speak. It was raining. I was living in Wigglesworth Hall. I ran out the door. There was a mailbox in front of my dorm on Mass Ave. I put the envelope in. I came running back as it was raining. The phone is ringing. I unlock the door. I come in. I pick up the phone. It's the dean of students saying he has just had a call from John Denver's management. He wants to come to Harvard to speak. Can you believe that?
Timing.
Unbelievable. And I can remember one day my roommate picked up the phone and he goes, Dan, it's John Denver. So I was just shaking like a leaf. And when the day came when he spoke, I went over to the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge, and there he comes down in those glass elevators that the Hyatts always had, wearing a beautiful leather cocoa parka. And we drove over to Harvard in his limousine and hung out for an hour speaking. And so that and Clive Davis were my two big introductions to fame.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing.
It was remarkable.
Now, so Clive gives you that news and that you should not consider music as your career, and you go off and you entrepreneurism, creating all these great opportunities for volunteerism and raise funds and philanthropy. What was the thing that clicked that suddenly you're like, I'm going to go back to my music?
I spent probably 25 years in philanthropy, raising tons of money and then writing books and speaking all over the world about this subject. And I you know what it was? I went and saw Springsteen on Broadway, and I thought to myself, I've spoken at hundreds of philanthropic conferences around the world. And in the evening, they all have entertainment. They need entertainment, like a thinking person's entertainment. And I thought, I wonder if I could put together a one-person show where the thread is, humanity and causes and trying to make a difference. And so I was going to do all cover songs. And when I was done writing it, I thought, I should write one song that's my own to include in this collection. And all of a sudden, the songs started pouring out in a way they just never did when I was young. Somehow Springsteen and Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and James Taylor, at the age of 20 or 21 or 22, they had very wise, very mature, original things to say about the world, about the country, about their emotional lives. I did not. I was an inauthentic, self-hating, had no clue who I really was, closeted gay guy wanting to write about South Africa and apartheid and all this stuff. Well, what's Springsteen's core issue? It's that damn town and his relationship with his father. What's my core issue? I'm gay, and in a world that doesn't accept that. What am I writing about? Anything but that. Anything but my core issue. So how could any kind of an emotionally authentic song come out of that? And then, cut to whatever it is, 40, 20, 35 years later, I've dealt with all of that. I've been in therapy. I've accepted myself. I've married someone that I've been with for 25 years. I've had children. I've had people die of suicide. I've lived and I've understood what I feel about things. And all of these songs just started pouring out and continue to this day about this stage in my life. Like most 20-year-olds, Springsteen's an exception, but what are they writing about? Breakups and relationship and love. Well, if you're gay, you got to fake it. You got to make up songs about girls. So that, and interestingly, a lot of people, they produce so much material, whether it's a Bruce Hornsby or a Melissa Etheridge or a Tracy Chapman or U2, there's so much material in their 20s. And you don't hear much from them in their 60s. So you don't hear them writing about the themes that confront someone in their 60s. Now, maybe they are, Springsteen continues to produce stuff. Sting, a lot less, although once in a while you hear something out of him. But I think there are issues in our 60s that are really important to deal with, our mortality, retiring, sending kids off to college, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible because we focus so much on youth.
Yeah.
But the things that we've learned and the opportunity to hand the knowledge you've accumulated off later in life is so great, yet a lot of artists kind of struggle with it because what do I say now? What is left to be said? Trying to figure it out, because when you have a small sphere of influence in your life when you're young, right? That's all you pull from. Suddenly you have a vast library.
Yeah.
Which book do you pull off the shelf?
Right.
It's definitely a little more challenging, I think, but I enjoy hearing those stories and those ideas because we are all growing. We're all growing together.
Yeah.
And I think if you embrace them, you actually still have things to learn from those stories that artists will tell. I mean, Springsteen with his last album, for example, not Western Stars, but his
Letter to You.
Yeah, Letter to You.
Right.
Things of that nature. And you've hit the nail on the head, because I was about to ask you about your inspiration. You obviously have a deep well to go to.
Yeah. I'm inspired. I live in this little town called Topsfield, Massachusetts, 6,000 people. I walk past farms and goats and horses and lambs and lilacs every morning. And it's interesting how the little things you see on that walk lend themselves to metaphors that are about much larger things, So with this song that did really well on Spotify called Kicking a Stone, I'm just kicking a stone down the road. I'm just seeing how far I can get it to go. I'm just taking it nice and easy and slow. I'm just kicking a stone down the road. From where do we come to where do we go? I'm just kicking a stone down the road, Or a school bus drove by me 6 months ago, and that's become the most listened to song I have on Spotify, called School Bus. And I remembered seeing my kids in that school bus drift on down the road and thinking, what an idyllic life I have. I'm in this beautiful, bucolic setting, and there's a Norman Rockwell school bus driving down the road carrying my 3 kids. So this was a few months ago. My kids are older now. They're not on the school bus. And I thought, I'm going to write a song about the kids on the school bus. And it wasn't working. And I thought, what about the woman driving that school bus? Now that would be interesting. And so imagining what her life is like. And I'm not sure I would have wanted to do that when I was 20. I wouldn't have thought to think she had a husband who died. They were just getting ready to go visit the kids, but it ended up being the other way around. The kids had to come to their dad's funeral. Or 3 weeks ago, I'm walking down the street and the trash man pulls up, and I've seen trash trucks a million times like the rest of us. And something at that moment just went song. And by the time I was home, the song was written about this trash man. Or a song called Slow Life. You saw a squirrel twirling around a tree, and the morning lights diffuse. All my manic ambitions and me, we shook on a truce. So just nature can be really my inspiration a lot these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that in the day of digital tsunami that we live in.
Good word.
That our age and our wisdom and the slowing down of life gives us greater insight and perspective to what happens from moment to moment.
Yeah.
Regardless of all of that deluge of things that are coming at us constantly.
Yeah. 2 things to say. One, Tom Waits was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, and he's so impatient with interviewers. The interviewer said, "The last leaf on the tree. Now, where'd you come up with that idea? That's a great metaphor." And he goes, "I just was looking at a tree and I saw the last leaf." Right? Like people think it's the other way around. No, literally, you see a leaf on a tree and it inspires a song. But our age, being 64, like I wrote a song 2 years ago called Couldn't Make It Rhyme, about a relationship that I had in my 20s. And I could never have written that song in my 20s because 40 years later, this guy that I was with died in unpleasant circumstances. And the song could not have been written until that happened, or the song Working Man's Son that I wrote about my dad. My dad passed away 3 years ago, and those feelings just weren't there when he was alive. It's, when he was gone that I started to think about how I grew up with his broken heart, because I knew he had dreams that he had to set to the side to raise a family. I didn't have any consciousness about that when I was 25 years old. Now, Springsteen did at the age of whatever. When did he write Tunnel of Love? Maybe 35. And he said, or even in Independence Day, they ain't going to do to me what I watched them do to you. Or I never meant to take those dreams away. Yeah, he's just a unique receptor to the universe. I have a friend who's close friends with him. He says, yeah, he's just like a radio antenna to ideas. Did you see that documentary that Johnny Depp had something to do with about Shane MacGowan, Shane MacGowan and a Pot of Gold? And it's a couple of years before he died, a few years before he died. So he's got that shaky voice and that alcoholic kind of countenance about him. But he's got the shaky voice, and he says, the songs come from the ether and you have to grab them or Paul Simon will.
That's great. That is absolutely great. No, I'd not seen that, but it certainly sounds like it's worth
you'd love
we're
it.
Seeing where it's streaming for sure. I mean, there's a video out there called Slow Down to Speed Up, I think. And what's his name? The actor played McDreamy in that hospital show. I forget his name, but it's about slowing down so that you can see the world around you, so that you can speed up once you've made those choices and those decisions. And I think that's what, kind of the theme of what we're talking about here is finding that ability to slow down, see the world around you. Some people have always lived in a slower speed than others. And then there are those who are thrust into the speed of life. I'm curious, because you've had a bunch of singles out. What's going to be the culmination of those singles, and what does the rest of 2025 have in store for you?
I got 3 more songs. I got a long line of songs that are waiting to get to the plate to bat, so to speak. So I'm not sure which ones they'll be. This one, Trash Man, is up next, and I'm in a building that's an old blacksmith shop that I bought a few years ago, and so I have all my recording gear on the other side of the equipment of the computer. And downstairs, we just opened a performance space called Good Folk, and we reskinned the building and put a big rusted metal sign called Good Folk. And we did our first 3 shows at the end of April, sold those out, 32 seats each, just a nice listening audience. Then we had a wonderful songwriter from Cape Cod named Greg Loftus last week for 2 nights. We've got a local folk duo in June for 2 nights. So today I'm playing This Land Is Your Land at a flag raising ceremony for Pride Month. But for me, getting to play for people this year and next year, like more of that, because I've done a lot of recording and it's wonderful. You produce this beautiful product, and I'll continue to do that. And people say, oh, you get this many listens on Spotify, or 30,000 people have watched it on YouTube, but you're getting no feedback. There's no comments on Spotify, so you can't see what people are saying there. And YouTube, maybe some people will like it, but nobody comments. Virtually nobody comments on YouTube. So it's lonely. You feel like, I don't know what people think. I don't know what they're relating to here. So being with people, present with people, and actually performing with them in the same room and sharing these thoughts and ideas is the most fulfilling thing for me. And I want to do a lot more of it.
That sounds great. I wish I was up in the area. I'm down in Dallas, so I'm not necessarily up in the Northeast a lot, but that sounds like a great venue.
Yeah.
You've brought up, you've had a lot of opportunities in your career, but there's always, and I'm not a bucket list kind of guy. I'm a dream big kind of make it happen kind of person. And I know through feedback from our conversations here on the hang that sometimes we talk about stuff and it comes full circle. So one question that I'm always curious about is, if you had an opportunity to collaborate with another musician and get into a studio for one day to be creative, and it could be you create a song, you just create lyrics, you could create art together, but you have that opportunity to be creative with someone and share in that way, who would that be and why?
It would be either John Mellencamp, Steve Earle, or Springsteen. I would add Tom Waits to the list, but I don't think he'd talk to me if we had the time. So, and if I had to choose between those three, having been to a couple of Steve Earle's songwriting camps, I would probably pick Springsteen just because of his personality and demeanor. I think I'd get the most out of that. Like, I would just love to ask him, like, all right, would you change the melody right here? Would you put it in a minor key? This character, would he say this? Is this a weird thing I have him saying? Or, what would you have him say? I had this, I was in the Double RL store, the Ralph Lauren cowboy brand on Madison Avenue one day. And I opened the fitting room door and Springsteen was in there trying on his shirt. And my heart rate just is like a rabbit. I think rabbits have the highest heart rates, right? And so I'm walking around like, no, don't talk to him. Don't talk. No, leave him alone. Leave him alone. Don't talk to him. So I said, all right. So after about 20 minutes, I decided I'm going to leave. And I left, and I'm going down this little wooden staircase. I'd lost track of him, and he's coming up the other side of the staircase, just the two of us. And I said, Bruce, can I talk to you for 30 seconds? And I said, I'm not dying of cancer or anything, but it would be a wish come true if I could spend the afternoon playing songs with you. And he paused and he said, well, you got a number? And I gave him my number, but I never heard from him. So I got close to that experience.
All right, well, now we have to make it happen. I mean, you are the second person in the last couple of months who has brought up the boss on the hang. And I'm sure someone in the audience, although you've been connected to him nascently here and there, these sliding doors, who watching today can make this happen for you. So I think that'd be a tremendous opportunity. And if it does happen, you're coming back to tell us all about it.
You bet.
Now we're big supporters, and I know you've talked about your music being on Spotify, but we're big supporters here of supporting musicians. Now, if you live in the Northeast, you need to go to his new venue. You need to go see an artist in a small, intimate environment, kind of, I'd say, house concert-esque, right? Yeah, and really immerse yourself in those types of moments, because we're so used to seeing these big production shows that we've lost a bit of the art of just sitting with a few people to enjoy a show. And with that said, it could be hard to keep that facility open on Spotify royalties. So I think it's important that people go out, purchase Dan's music, support what he's doing, and him and all of the other artists that we talk about, because it's harder than ever to be a musician who's trying to pave your way out there these days. So please go out and go to his website. All the links you'll need are in the description below to help support Dan. But with that, like we're sitting here just having a beer, hanging out. You mentioned that you don't necessarily put a lot of music on when you go on your daily walks, but do you listen to music at other times? And are there anyone that lately you've just been kind of listening to, embracing, whether it's new or old, that if you were saying to me, Scott, here's some people you got to check out, who would they be and why? Do you have a couple?
Yeah, there's some famous people and quasi-famous, and then there's some unknowns. I would say in the first bucket, Anders Osborne, the New Orleans blues guitar player who writes the most amazing lyrics and songs. Anders is incredible, and he fills like city wineries, So Anders Osborne. I'll always listen to a Steve Earle album. I'll always listen to a Tom Waits album. Actually, Peter Gabriel's I.O., that new album, was pretty amazing. Lord Huron, I love listening to them. And then on the unknown side, Greg Loftus, who played downstairs here, he's one of those people, both of these people, like, why isn't he famous? he's like sort of country tinged folk singer. And then this kid from Austin, or is he in Houston now? Thomas Chorba, Csorba. I remember when I first listened to him 7 or 8 years ago, I thought, this is a 40-year-old Waylon Jennings looking type. He was this like 20-year-old college student with a fisherman knit sweater and glasses. Like, how is that folk sound and that voice coming out of that? And now, he's matured and made a lot more albums, and they're both really, really wonderful. Lucinda Williams, Mary Gauthier, John Prine. Those are all always people I'll pop on.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I just recently had the opportunity to sit down with Leo Lovechild, who, this young Jewish guy from Brooklyn who is doing some really amazing stuff in the country, kind of alt country genre. Got noticed by Jimmy Fallon's show, and then I happened to come across him on Instagram. I'm like, I got to meet this guy. So there are some really amazing artists out there who are working really hard to redefine the genre they're in. So I appreciate those recommendations. Dan, this has been a pleasure getting to know you. Maybe we'll get back together again once you and the boss have created something. Maybe we debut it here. Let's make this happen for Dan. Let's give him that opportunity, because I think it's important that when we set our sights on something, we go out and achieve them in life. And I appreciate that you circled back to music and you decided that this is a place that you want to be. So with that, we're going to probably get together again at some point. Maybe we'll talk more about, the things you've done on the entrepreneur side. And by then you'll have some more songs in the bag. Everybody go out, find Dan's music. It's down in the links below. Support him and come back and hang out with us. We're just having these conversations so we get to know each other, because that's half the battle in the world we have today, is we don't spend enough time getting to know one another and really kind of digging into who's who and what they're about. So Dan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Scott. This has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to more conversations, either online or just hanging out together.
You know what? We're going to do it for sure. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for hanging, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.